Well, alright everybody, welcome to RCT Creations yet again. Thank you for giving me your attention for a couple of minutes. This is a park showcase video, and I haven't done them in the live com style before, but we're gonna switch it up a little bit. This is Quarry Park. So this was my attempt at a 100 by 100 amusement park with a couple little twists on it. This is the view from the top. The main entrance is going to be in the front there on the bottom right hand side. And we're just going to go ahead, I think, and start at the main gate and move in a counterclockwise direction. So we'll start over in this area. I got to bring my cursor up, but now we can see it. It's right there. Well, we'll go ahead and scroll in and get started. Now my initial idea for this park, that's really loud, I'm going to zoom out again. My initial idea for this park was, again, the 100 by 100 philosophy, kind of a desert style park, and the way I got to kind of the style with the desert and the big hill in the background is I just happened to like stumble upon a POV of Magnus Colossus at Terra Mythica, and that kind of inspired me for this. And the reason I picked 100 by 100 and not 50 by 50 is I wanted to have enough room to kind of give a similar vibe. So what I did is I created this park, I got the landscape to where I wanted it to be, and from the start I knew I wanted there to be a massive wooden roller coaster, which is in, and we'll get to that at some point. And then I wanted to have that same coaster have a terrain element, and then I asked a couple of friends of mine to give me two kind of filler steel coasters, so to speak. So we ended up with the two steel coasters we've got. Let's go ahead and jump right on in. Gonna get a little bit louder as we have our main gate here, which I think turned out really nice. I mean, I love this path style. It just kind of looks a little fancier to me, and it blends in with the landscape a little bit. So we have our ticket booths on the right hand side, then on this side there's a restroom, and then guest services will be right here in case any guests would happen to have any questions. And then obviously ticketing over here. Our main entrance is going to be right here, and we have 1, 2, 3 lanes, and then our exits would be on the far side of the building. Now RCT guests aren't quite as smart as that, and I didn't feel like placing a bunch of hidden no entry signs around, so we just kind of let it flow a little bit. But we got some nice fountains up front for a nice visual effect as guests walk in, and maybe even in a hot and warm climate you get a little bit of misting as you walk in to cool off a little bit. Anyway, we go beyond the entrance, and every park needs to be completed with a carousel right at the front. So we did that here. So we have the Quarry Park carousel located right at the front. First thing guests will see, and then at the very back here we have another restroom. And we're going to go in that counterclockwise direction, past this little food stand right here, into our kind of kids area. So with our kids area, we have our Ferris wheel, we have our mini golf course, we have a maze, we have a car ride, and then we have a kiddie coaster. Now, one thing, if you're building a park that can be easily missed, is the kiddie coaster. And they don't have to be anything horribly complicated, something as small as this. Just an oval layout that runs 2 laps. It's very simple. The stats on it actually are pretty decent. The intensity rating is way above what a kiddie coaster should be, but that's because I have it running 3 laps. I said 2, it's 3. But it's because I have it running 3 laps. If it just ran 1, it would get a much lower rating. But we're giving the kids a little bit of a thrill as they get started here with that bit of a intensity rating there. Moving on out of the kids area, we get into our first steel coaster. We have Tumbleweed, which is a SNS 40 free spin coaster. Now this one is going to be the full layout, so it has the 2 little hops and then the Raven turn, couple little hops, Raven turn, brakes, Raven turn, down, back to the station. Now, when it comes to SNS free spins, if you've been on one, you'll probably know this, but some of you may not have been on one that has the dampeners on pretty loose. These rides can be awesome. The problem is a lot of parks run the dampeners really tight so they don't get a chance to flip as much. If you're riding one of these and you don't flip at least 3 times, the ride can potentially be not great, and it can be potentially uncomfortable as well. So at this park, we set the dampeners on loose, so you get the opportunity to spin a little bit. Now, as far as the in-game recreation goes, you can't set the multi-dimension coaster to free spin, so I just kind of went through and set each section to a different spin rate so it looks like the cars do a little bit of spinning. Fun fact about the, I saved the track design and I can't build it unless I enable all drawable track pieces, which I find kind of funny. But back to the example of, you know, the two-phase sides of these rides. Look no further than Tumbleweed at King's Dominion and Dragon Slayer at Adventureland. I have ridden both. I imagine not a horribly big set of the population has ridden both, but if you have or would ever get the chance to do that, Dragon Slayer at Adventureland has the dampener set a lot looser, so it runs way more fun and can actually kind of unleash the full potential of the ride. I've ridden that and gotten up to 14, 15 spins, and that's on the shortened layout. Absolute blast. I mean, there's really not much more fun, and it can potentially be the most intense coaster. Not that I've ever been on, but it's definitely up there and can definitely be the most intense coaster at Adventureland. Now, Tumbleweed, on the other hand, though it is overshadowed by a lot of the rides that are around it, and it's basically was a replacement for a top spin. If you ride that ride, I have gotten more rides with 0 flips than I have gotten rides with 2+. And then with the way the Raven turns are set up, you can really end up in a pretty uncomfortable position when it goes over that hill. So I mean, 40 free spins are very hit or miss, and a good example of a 40 free spin, you have Arashi at Nagashima Spa in Japan, and then you have Dragon Slayer at Adventureland. Those are my, well, Dragon Slayer I've been on, I have not been on Arashi, but those are the two, I think, gold standards for what free spins can be. Alright, let's go ahead and take a ride on Tumbleweed at Quarry Park. Well, welcome back, riders. Hope you enjoyed that ride. Let's go ahead and move on over further around the park. As we go back down, we have another restroom here. We have our Zamperla flying carousel, or chair swing, whichever you want to call it. We have our go-karts. Now, when I build the go-karts in Roller Coaster Tycoon 2, pardon me, I gotta pop that balloon. When I build go-karts in Roller Coaster Tycoon 2, OpenRCT2 specifically, I tend to use the RCT1 sprites because I love the view of them driving around with their little helmets on. It gives kind of the illusion of safety in the game, but I just think it's awesome and it looks adorable, so I tend to do that. I love the helmets that the guests wear on the go-karts, and they're just kind of fun to listen to. And I love the detail of you have the race, was won by a specific guest. I always have enjoyed that. So go-kart tracks are just kind of fun to sit and watch if you've never done that before. Moving on, we have our Scrambler, which I call Wrangler. I really like that name. It was a name at another park. Can't think of it off the top of my head. But Wrangler is typically what I will name Scramblers. If I don't, just name them the model name. Right across from Wrangler is going to be Fire in the Hole, which is a plan definitely inspired by the one at Silver Dollar City. At least the name is anyway. But the ride itself is a Intamin second generation drop tower. Rise all the way to the top. You have 4 separate cars, and then you free fall back to the ground. Really, really fun. I can't tell you how much I enjoy drop towers. There's some of the few rides that actually still give me a little bit of like uneasiness, but I love these Intamin second gen drop towers. The Intamin first gen drop towers are really fun as well. So if you haven't had the chance to ride Demon Drop at Dorney Park, definitely would recommend trying to get over there to get on that, especially with the way Six Flags has been acting lately. Then we have our Larson Super Loop, which were very popular in the late 2010s. Six Flags installed a ton of these, Legacy Six Flags that is, installed a ton of these all over the place, and they're already kind of fallen by the wayside. Hershon has already removed the one from Kentucky Kingdom, and I would imagine, since Six Flags has also removed a couple of them, they're probably not long for this world. Then we have our bumper cars. Moving up, we have our pirate ship, which I kind of like the way the queue is set up for this one. You walk over the lake, and then I thought, that's kind of cool. You're in the desert, why not theme it to a mirage? So that's what I ended up calling it. On the far side, we have Ripsaw, which is our Huss top spin. These are also kind of a dying breed, although Alton Tower has just installed one, so I can now realistically start adding them to my parks again, which is awesome. Moving on. So at Quarry Park, this was kind of another piece I really wanted to have when I started building it. I wanted to have, like, if this was an active quarry, there definitely would have been some machinery and some equipment there. So why not build an elevator? And then the elevator can be used in the amusement park setting too if it meets a couple different safety standards, so threw it in there. So now the former elevator for when the quarry was active is now used as an amusement ride. So we can kind of keep that together. Then up top, we have a restroom, and then we have a nice little food plaza with a really cool place you can look at the park from high above. Now, if I were to go get lunch at an amusement park, I'd probably pick the place where you can get an awesome view of the entire park from way up high. So that's what I did. Now, originally, if this was a perfect world in RCT, I would just have the elevator as the only way to get up there. Maybe a backup set of stairs that would be used kind of as like show, like the guests wouldn't actually use them in the game, they'd only be there for emergencies in case the elevator stopped working. However, since RCT guests aren't the brightest sometimes, there is an underground path for guests to go up and down to take care of that and the pathfinding issues that would cause. Moving on, we are going to look at our splash boats, which is called Splashdown. Not very creative when it comes to naming water rides. But I really like the way it looks with the dual tunnel lift hill. So it gives you kind of maybe a chance to maybe put some animatronics in there, a couple sound effects as you go up the lift. And one thing I found out when building this, when I do the splash boats rides, I don't like how slow the lift can be because it really kills the throughput. So I'll change the ride type to like a wooden roller coaster or something with a slow lift, and I'll install a lift. Fun fact, the splash boats actually has its own lift sound effect, which I found kind of interesting. But if you ever build one like that and actually add chain lift pieces in, if you listen really closely, you can actually hear, you know, a special sound effect for lift hills on splash boats, which I thought was kind of interesting. But anyway, the ride itself, a big lift, turn around, big drop. You have your bridge where if you exit or if you just want to get drenched for whatever reason, you can stand there and then just get absolutely annihilated by water. Splash boats, especially the older style ones, show no mercy when it comes to leaving you dry, so I tend to avoid them. In fact, I have never been on a traditional shoot the chutes, because if I'm gonna go to an amusement park and get drenched, one, it's gonna be raining, or two, I'm gonna go to the water park. But there you go. But we have our drop, a couple fountains for effect, and then a turnaround right back into the station. And with the low throughput, these rides tend to draw quite a big crowd in this game. Now we can move on to our stock car racing ride. If there was one ride I would say that doesn't really fit in this park very well, it's this one, and there's kind of a reason for that. Originally, I wanted this car ride to launch, so I tried to change the ride type, put in an LSM launch, have the cars fire down the track before kind of going here, and that is why the finish line sign is right here and not at the end of the ride. Unfortunately, I could not get that to work. So this was the final result. We have just kind of a straightaway with the two cars running alongside each other. And then once you get over here, they split off and go in different directions. But just another family ride I was able to fit in. I was hoping to add a little extra dimension for thrills with a, like, not a fast launch, but kind of like maybe a 10, 15 miles an hour launch at the start before it goes into the normal car ride part. But fortunately, I wasn't able to do that, and I was too lazy to keep attempting, so this was the final result. Then we have our traditional haunted house, which looks kind of fun. You got a little bit of a yard there, the wooden fence leading up to it, the manor entrance there. I love haunted houses, I think they're kind of fun. And then we move on, we have our roundup, which is, again, uncreatively named roundup. And then we get into the main event of Quarry Park, and that is going to be the Tremor wooden roller coaster. Now, this ride, as far as the park goes, is built in-house, so we didn't have an outside, manufacturer come in and do it. You saw this in the early 90s, late 80s, mid 80s, early 90s quite a bit. Six Flags Great America built Viper in-house. In the late 70s, Kings Island built the Beast in-house, even though they had some professional designers help them out. But this ride, all in, built by Quarry Entertainment. And like I said, the main event, the main inspiration was Magnus Colossus at Terminico, which is now standing but not operating, and I would be very, very surprised if that ride were to ever reopen. But you have the start here, cross over the transfer track, up the lift hill, which is absolutely massive. However, to save on construction costs, well, not really construction costs, to save on materials costs, you have kind of the ledge here, which helps keep it low. So you have a big lift hill, then the footers can go nice and low, and then they get tall again, and then right at the top of the quarry here, you have the top of the lift. So the top of the lift hill, not very far off the ground, i.e. Magnus Colossus, Boulder Dash is kind of the same thing where the lift hill goes up with the terrain. And one of my favorite elements of this ride is this hesitation on the drop. When it comes down and it comes back up here, because there's only an extra 5-foot difference in height, it really hangs the front cars over the drop. So you give the guest a chance to go, oh my goodness, did I really just do this, before the ride just absolutely takes off, which I absolutely love. But just like Magnus Colossus, we have our double down drop, and then to make it one of the tallest wooden coasters, in fact, I think in the modern era, this actually would be the tallest modern wooden coaster. In the era, this would be constructed, let's say 1997, where there were many companies looking to get those coaster records during the Coaster Wars. You saw it with Rattler at Six Flags Fiesta Texas going for the wooden coaster record. Texas Giant was going for the wooden coaster record. Dorney Park tried to claim the tallest wooden coaster record. Those three rides were instrumental. Mean Streak opened in that time frame. And this ride kind of fits towards the end, right before Son of Beast were to open. The problem when you build these traditional wooden coasters this big is they just shake themselves to pieces. And what would happen is the construction costs and the refurbishment costs to replace the wood would get so high, they tend to put steel bracing on the topper track itself. And then that steel bracing would make the structure so rigid that the friction, not really friction, but the forces had nowhere to go but on the rider. So over time they get very, very uncomfortably rough for riders. And the reasoning for that in that steel bracing was to try to prevent the ride from shaking itself apart, because with the traditional wooden coaster, at some point you just hit a spot where it's just too big, too fast, and it's not cost effective and it's not comfortable for riders to keep the ride in tip-top shape. This ride probably would not be horribly smooth by this point in its life, especially at the bottom of the drop. I mean, this is a very high-stress valley. No matter how many cross bends you have to try to prevent any gaps between the ground and the footers, I mean, it would grow rough over time, no doubt about it, just because it's going so fast over that section. You'd have to do so much track work on it. In fact, Voyage at Holiday World rebuilds and retracks about a third of the coaster every year just to keep it smooth, and they do a phenomenal job at taking care of that ride at Holiday World. But you have your massive double down drop, and then you hit the tallest point of the ride, which is the 160-foot second hill, which I believe would make this the tallest traditional wooden coaster in the world if it were to actually exist, but don't quote me on that. Now, one other problem that some of those massive wooden coasters have is they didn't really do much after they came in, but this ride throws in a few surprises. So you have your down off the second hill here. You go into a little bit of a hesitation on top of the second highest wall of the quarry, and then you come back down into another turnaround, so it kind of gets a little repetitive, but you do have a couple nice airtime moments in there, like this high-speed airtime hill right here, which would then lead into the mid-course brakes to trim off a little bit of that speed. Now, it does end with a kind of Rose Bowl element that is reminiscent of Son of Beast. This is something that RCCA wooden coasters would do a lot. There wasn't much RCCA could do, so they did a lot of just bowl moves. Son of Beast being a big example of that, and in fact, nearly all their coasters has some form of bowl on it. I think Magnus Colossus actually has 2 as well, somewhere on there. Don't do a whole lot. They get very intense at the bottom, but they don't give any airtime. They can give good laterals depending on the banking, but very traditional. If you do it too much, the ride doesn't have much flavor outside of that, but I tried to add a little bit of that in with this ride. After the bowl, we come back down, we pop up into the final brake run and head back to the station. This ride, I think, looks absolutely gorgeous, and I think turned out really well. Now, if I were to ride it in the modern age, probably wouldn't be the smoothest ride in the world, but I think the ride looks absolutely beautiful, and the guests are definitely queuing up on it right here. And one thing to mention about the queue here, back in the day, before OpenRCT2 existed, there was a YouTuber by the name of Fluxtrance who built Flux Park. It was his mega park, and I would definitely recommend going and checking that out. Very fun series if you're just looking for something either to watch for inspiration or just put on the background, because it's just so... there's so much that goes on in that series, and he touches so many different bases. But one thing I really liked, he has a wooden coaster in that park called Rage, I want to say is what it was called. And for Rage, this also being a massive wooden coaster, he had a nice little western town built that the queue looped through, and I absolutely used that for inspiration here. And then we hired a couple entertainers to kind of go around and give the guests a show in the initial part of the queue before you go into the structure and can kind of get ready to head back up to the ride. Anyway, with that being said, let's go ahead and take a ride on the Tremor wooden roller coaster. And welcome back, riders. Hope you enjoyed your ride on Tremor. We're going to go ahead and move on over to the final little bit of park we've got here. We got our little souvenir stand right near the exit. One thing I will say I really like is how long and windy the exit for this is. You got to go down these stairs, out this way, underneath the structure again, all the way back around through a tunnel, and then you're finally at the exit, which is right next to the entrance. For the guests in the game, the nice thing is if they're sick from the ride, they're probably not by the time they get out, and they'll get right back in line to go for another ride. Moving on, we have our Huss Rides breakdance called Armadillo, and that is a name that was taken from, I think Six Flags Over Texas had a breakdance called Armadillo, and I think Six Flags America also had one. I don't think they still do. As of this recording, Six Flags America is in its last month of operation, which is very sad. Very fortunate I got the opportunity to go visit that park while it was open, and I got to ride every coaster that was there, including Batwing, which was absolutely awesome. Anyway, moving on from the sad bit of information, we'll go on to our final roller coaster and final attraction at the park, which is Scorpion, a Gerstlauer Eurofighter roller coaster. Now, fun fact, I've actually never ridden a Gerstlauer Eurofighter. I've been on an Infinity coaster before, but never a Eurofighter. I haven't been to the Mall of America to get a chance to ride Rock Bottom Plunge, and I haven't been anywhere that has one. But I thought this would be a good... This is one of the suggestions my buddy gave me. So the Free Spin was one, and then the Gerstlauer Eurofighter was the other. So they both made their way in the park. So, traditional Gerstlauer vertical lift. Unfortunately, Beyond Vertical Drops are very not easy in this game. I don't think they look very good as the final product when the train passes over it. So I tend to just go vertical lift into vertical drop. It has 5 inversions, packed into it. We have this loop here, goes up and goes into kind of the 0G roll, doubles back, and then comes back down. And a nice little airtime moment right here into a vertical loop. And then we'll turn back around. There's a cut back corkscrew right here, and then a 0G roll, and then you are slammed into the brakes. So it's a very short ride, but very action-packed for the time you get on it. And actually, I lied. I have been on a Gerstlauer Eurofighter. However, doesn't have the traditional 8-person cars. I've been on Daredevil Dive at Six Flags Over Georgia, which has 6-person cars. So I have that going for me. So I have been on a Eurofighter. I lied. But anyway, let's go ahead. I'll thank you guys for watching right now before we go into our ride. Thank you for tuning in and taking a look at Quarry Park. Kind of a nice little bit of a brain break from our Fun Corporation series. Get a little bit of inspiration for some builds in the modern era. And then it kind of gives some more inspiration for anything else you can do. So if you're in the middle of a park and you're not sure what to do next, don't be afraid to come over and build another, small park. Use a 50 by 50, 100 by 100. Just put something small together where you don't care about eras or anything like that. You just want to put something together. But let's go ahead and hop on our ride on Scorpion. I know you'll enjoy your ride, and thank you for tuning in and watching the Quarry Park Showcase. I'll talk to you later.